Hello and welcome to Counselling and Psychotherapy Tutor. Today we're going to be looking at single session therapy. What is it? It really is the intentional endeavour of the therapist to provide immediate help at the point of need. It's the intentional endeavour of the client to actively engage in support, to find immediate solutions to a specific problem or emotional issue that they are experiencing in the present time. And it's really a kind of mindset rather than a modality in itself or a theory or a psychological approach to client issues. What it does do is it sets out to provide solution-focused help in one session. So it sets out to support a client in one session to resolve an issue, whilst acknowledging that more support can be or could be available to the client. There is an underlying assumption around single session therapy, and that is it does assume that brief therapy or a brief encounter can be therapeutic for clients. So whilst the therapy length is expandable, the idea is that clients can and will make the best use of the time that is available. I think the long duration of a single session therapy is 3 hours. And I think the shortest, which was Windy Drydens himself, about 3.5 minutes, I think. Don't quote me on that. After a single session therapy, clients are really encouraged to reflect, digest, act, wait, and then make a decision if more support is needed. So the contracting is for one single session. Clients are then encouraged to take some time out to reflect, to digest their experience of that session, to act on the solution that they've come up with from that session, wait a little while, and then decide if more support is appropriate. And when we're talking about single session therapy, we're really talking about the work of Windy Drydens. He is one of the leading practitioners and trainers in the UK in cognitive behavioural therapy and a 1+ therapy. He's probably best known for his work on REBT, rational emotive behaviour therapy, and he is responsible for the development of this concept of single session therapy. He's been working in the field of counselling and psychotherapy since 1975, and I think was one of the first people in the UK or in Britain to be trained in CBT. And his own training was with people like Lazarus and Aaron Bear. He's published over 240 books and has trained therapists all over the world: UK, North and South America, India, Europe, Middle East, South Africa. He's also a professor of psychotherapeutic studies at Goldsmiths University in London. So this is his concept. And we've kind of just been looking at some of the endeavours or the intention of single session therapy is, and certainly for my students, I always encourage reflective practice. So you might want to start thinking about what are your immediate responses to single session therapy as an idea. Perhaps consider your own experiences of being helped and changed through a brief encounter in your life. So if we think about the underlying assumption of single session therapy, it's that actually brief encounters can be transformative. They can evoke change for people. So is that something that you fundamentally believe? So you might consider, your own experience of being helped or changed through a kind of brief encounter in your lives. And what was it about that encounter that made it therapeutically beneficial for you? It's really important that you think about your immediate responses and perhaps challenge them. Try and open your mind up to the idea that actually a brief encounter could be helpful and beneficial to clients. And in order for it to be effective, help must be provided at the point of need. So Windy Drydens is very clear about this. It works incredibly well when the support is provided quickly in response to the client reaching out for support. Perhaps we're thinking about walk-in services where someone can access therapeutic support immediately at that first point of contact, or drop-in services again, where support can be provided at that first point of contact. We're not talking about clients who've been on a waiting list for ages or have pre-assessments or assessments going on. There has to be, for it to be effective, there has to be realistic expectations. So we have to think about having achievable and manageable goals or expectations of the session. The idea that fundamental personality change is going to occur in a single session is perhaps an unrealistic expectation. For SST to be effective, the therapist must have a mindset that change can occur through a brief encounter, and the therapist must be focused and motivated to provide this for clients. Equally important is the client factors involved. It's important that the client is consenting to a single session approach and is highly motivated to receive that support and is highly motivated change for moving forward and finding solutions. And so that's what kind of makes single session therapy effective. Perhaps it's less effective when there is a lack of organisational support, if it's an approach that's not supported fundamentally by organisations. It's less effective when clients are offered blocks of session. The whole idea of this is that it is a single session. And so blocks of session tends to have a negative effect outcomes. It tends to be less effective when assessments, case formulations or case histories are completed. It takes away from the fundamental focus of a single session. It's less effective when there is a gap between the client asking for support and then receiving the support. Windy Drydens certainly believes that therapy has to be provided at the point of need. That therapy length is best decided by the client. We have to assume that clients are able to identify the issue that they face. The client needs to be able to identify what it is that has brought them into the space. And there has to be this fundamental belief that clients have got the emotional and relational resources to make use of and benefit from immediate single session therapy support. So there has to be that fundamental belief in the capacity, the resilience, the resources of the clients internally that they're able to make best use of this session. So what Windy Drydens says is that when help is immediate and at the point of a client seeking support, client motivation tends to be high. So you have clients who are really wanting to engage, really willing to engage, and really needing to engage in that moment. So those kind of client factors that affect the outcomes of therapy tend to be quite high. He also says that clients are much more likely to engage with a real intentionality to finding a solution to their issue, given a one session time frame. For clients given 6 sessions, they're going to make best use of 6 sessions. If they're given 12, they'll make best use of 12. If they're given open-ended, they'll make best use of open-ended. But it says that if clients are given 1 session, they will make the most and will engage with intentionality. He does say that, as I've mentioned already, I think it's better to provide support at the point of contact rather than waiting for assessments, right? He truly believes that any risks can be managed as they arrive in the session, rather than being on pre-filled out forms or risk assessments or any other kind of assessments that might be traditionally obtained before starting a therapeutic relationships. Dryden believes that more therapy is not necessarily better, right? And he does believe that between 70 and 80% of clients internationally feel better after one session. If we think about the goals of SST, the goal really is to help a client get unstuck. Clients, when they present for therapy, tend to be in crisis. There tends to be something very immediate going on for them. So the goal of SST or single session therapy is to help a client become unstuck in one single session. The goal is to help clients actively address a specific emotional or behavioural concern. So it's something they're experiencing in the current time, emotionally or behaviourally. It's a specific concern that you're going to kind of facilitate clients in addressing in one single session. Another goal of single session therapy is to really help clients to understand that they can achieve set goals, that they have the resources, that they have the capacity, that they are able to unstuck themselves. It's really important in single session therapy that what you're doing is helping a client select a solution for themselves. This is not necessarily about a therapist coming along and just giving an answer. It's really about a collaborative approach to facilitating a client in becoming unstuck. So in that sense, perhaps you're exploring a range of different solutions with clients and having them select a solution that works for them. And it's also really important in single sessions that you give the clients, once the client has selected their solution, that you're giving them an experience of what that solution could and might feel like or be experienced as for them. So you might take 5-10 minutes of the session to really use imagination and really try and follow through with the solution. What might that feel like? How might that be experienced? How might you access your own internal resources to create this solution for yourself? So you might be using imagination, you might do a little bit of role play, and you're wanting to remain throughout. Another goal of single session therapy is to be focused on an action plan, what that can look like, what that is forward for the client. Single session therapy and good practice. So perhaps instead of taking a whole case history for a client or a timeline or whatever you might usually do, you might ask a client, what is it that's crucial for me to know about your personal history that will help me to help you today? You're really wanting to focus on the now, okay, what is going on now for the client, and have really realistic expectations as to what can actually be achieved. Or it's certainly good practice to remain as client-centered as you possibly can. You're wanting to provide those core conditions. You're wanting to hold the client at the center of the work and keep the focus on the client, what's important for them, what has meaning for them, what solution would best suit them. So you're wanting to remain client-centered with a real focus, though, on the client's explicit presenting problem. We're not focusing at all on case formulations, and we are not focusing on trying to access a client's implicit process. What we are wanting to do is really engage the client quickly. So this is because it's such a condensed process. So you're really wanting to kind of get that working alliance together relatively quickly. So you're wanting to really engage the client, really bring that energy to the session, focusing on them, their issue, what their needs are from you in that session, and demonstrate really openly, actually demonstrating your keenness and your willingness to help and support them in becoming unstuck. A really good alliance is needed. Clients really do have to feel, as in any other kind of therapy, important that clients experience. If we think of Carl Rogers and the core conditions, it's not enough to provide empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. You need the client, if we're thinking of those core conditions as a 6, you're really needing the client to experience them, needing the client to have a felt sense of them. So in single session therapy, what we're wanting is the client to very quickly, very early on in that session, to feel the therapist's authenticity and the therapist's desire and want to help. Ask the client on how they can be supported. How can I best help you to develop a good end of session today? Or if you were to go home today and be pleased with what has been achieved here, what would that look like? These are great questions that really demonstrate your willingness to help, but also access a lot around what the client's issue is and what they might like a solution to look like or feel like for them. It's okay in single session therapy. I know lots of therapeutic approaches don't encourage your own opinions. You can offer opinions in single session therapy if it's needed, but very important that you are agreeing mutually on the focus of the session. Both therapist and client have to have the same agenda and the same goal, the same desire for outcome. Really keep on track during the session using really good pacing. You want to keep really a really nice pace to the session, keep it moving, keep it flowing, and keep it moving in that kind of solution focused, unstuck direction. If the goal is to be unstuck, you're wanting to make sure the trajectory of the session and the pacing of the session is actively working towards that. You're wanting to have clarity, so any questions you ask, any paraphrases, any of core counselling skills, keep them short, keep them sweet, keep them clear. You don't want massive, long-winded interventions that are going to take your client off in a different direction. Be really clear about what you can and can't offer and communicate that. Another fundamental aspect of single session therapy is to identify quite early on in the session and utilize the client's strengths. Clients are able to access during the session their own emotional resources, their own capacity for change, their own resilience, their own strengths. It's helping them to see that their self-identified pre-existing strengths can be used with the current situation, the current stuff. You want to encourage clients to explore and utilize any environmental resources they have and support, whether that's support systems or other environmental resources that may be available to them. You might also want to explore with clients, how have they previously managed problems, or how have they previously managed this problem? What have they done up till now to try and cope and manage with their set goal for this session? So you might want to look at previous ways of managing the problem, how they are managing the problems well at the moment, what has worked well for them, what has worked less well for them, what might work well for them in the future. So you're wanting to reject very quickly all of the coping strategies or all of the ways that the client has tried to manage that have not worked. They need to go in the bin very quickly during the session. And you want to start picking up on those aspects of the ways that clients manage problems. You want to pick up on the aspects that do work and start building on those. Are there more of those resources that we can access to find a solution or to work through the unstuckness? So then you want to really negotiate a solution. So there has to be ways of getting clients to identify their resources, what's worked, what hasn't worked, reject what hasn't worked, let's build on what has worked, what might that look like, and start negotiating a solution. So what might be a better way of dealing with this now? We've got this resource, and we've got this strength and this strength. How can we utilize those and move forward towards a solution? So then you start this process of negotiating a solution with clients. But you then want to really encourage the client to rehearse the situation. So you want to have them really imagine the solution, what that might feel like, what that might look like, what would they be doing differently, what strengths they're using to facilitate change for themselves. So you might use imagination, you might do a role play in the room, but it's really important that the solution is actually rehearsed during the session. And then towards the end, you're going to want to identify what the client is taking away from the session. And that can be a really simple question. What might you take away from today's session? Talk to the client about developing an action plan for the client moving forward. You're taking X, Y, and Z away from the session. I wonder what the next steps will be when you leave here. Let's look at these next steps and what they could be. You then want to tie up the session with a nice, neat little bow. And you would do that as you would in any standard session. Provide a client summary, check that with the clients if they want to add any. So that is single session therapy. It was a very brief introduction. It is the work of Windy Drydens. If you're interested in learning more, accessing more about him, you can look on his website, which is www.windydryden.com. This has been the Counselling Psychotherapy Tutor. If you have enjoyed this video, feel free to like, follow and share. Please do subscribe. Thank you for watching and look out for our next video.